Are you or someone you know looking to buy or sell a home? When you use a HomeGain Realtor to buy or sell a home, you can get $150. Visit HomeGain.com and click on the Promo 150 banner at the top of the page to get started. Compare HomeGain Realtors and choose your favorite. Complete your home purchase or sale transaction with a HomeGain Realtor, and HomeGain will pay you $150. Get started today by going to HomeGain.com. Welcome back, everyone, to Real Estate 360 Live. I'm your host, Ryan Sloper, joined by my guest, Louis Cammarosano, the general manager of HomeGain. Quick reminder, Real Estate 360 is designed to build the Washington, D.C. Metro's housing and credit markets one house at a time. If you ever have any questions, concerns, or real estate needs, the best number to reach out to us is 877-245-2030. That's 877-245-2030. Like I said, if it's regarding interest rates, buying or selling a home, contemplating doing a short sale versus, you feel like you're going down the path of foreclosure and not sure where to turn, burying your head in the sand, we can help. The best thing to do is just reach out to a professional that can at least give you the advice that will allow you to make an informed decision. I see too many times, and I talk to too many people that they're just unsure, and they get advice from friends and family members that think they know what they're talking about because they heard that Jimmy up the street or their friend had something happen. I can tell you that every single person's situation is different, and that just because Jimmy up the street might have been making $100,000 but you're only making $50,000, it changes the game completely. So I always say, reach out to a professional that can give you at least the advice that's necessary for you to make the smart decision. I always caution people to at least get a second opinion outside of the friends, family members, and neighbors. Wouldn't you agree, Louis?
I would agree.
Yeah, I mean, it's just there's too much at stake, especially if you're considering, buying a home, making a big purchase transaction, or whether you're trying to sell your home. It's a distressed sale, and you're trying to short sell it to get out of a bad position. I mean, there's one of the things that I want to bring to light here is that, there's been a couple circumstances lately where FHA, which is a government-insured loan, if you actually short sale a property, but you actually don't have any negative payments, so you never really missed a payment, the bank allowed you to short sale without missing a payment, there is no guideline that prevents you from being able to buy another home the next day after that short sale goes through. This is one of the biggest things that I know is not put out there in the media. When you miss a payment, it's going to report negatively on your credit report. But if you never miss a payment, then you never had any negative pay history. So FHA will allow you, as long as you don't have any missed payments, to be able to buy again. So this is one of those things, once again, where if you're talking with a professional up front, they can give you the guidance necessary to be able to put you on the fast track to being able to potentially buy a home again. Because there might be a lot of other real estate agents that are out there who just say, oh, yeah, the bank's not going to work with you unless you go 30 days late or 45 days late. That's not the case. You have to obviously have some sort of hardship other than you just don't want to make your mortgage payment. But the reality is that, you really just need to look at your individual scenario and determine if you have a good case. And then if you have a good case, trying to work through that short sale without missing any payments. And what this really boils down to is being proactive ahead of time before you've spent your last dime and, you made your payments for the last 6 months and now you're out of money. My whole goal with this show is just to try to educate and inform you guys to be able to, for you to be able to make the best decision possible. And as long as, you have that information, then you'll be able to do that for yourself. 877-245-2030. That's 877-245-2030. So, Louis, I want to jump back into the Europe situation. I don't know if you saw the comments by billionaire investor George Soros, but he warned, I think it was this past Saturday, that European policymakers basically have a 3-month window to correct, all the mistakes that they've been taking place over the last year or so, and taking some sort of bold action to stabilize the euro. And he also expected that the Greek voters were going to back out the pro-bailout New Democracy political party in this month's election, but he added that no government in Athens would be able to impose the deeply unpopular austerity reforms that are a condition of international aid Greece needs to avoid a default, and that the Greek crisis is liable to come to a climax in the fall. So I tend to think that George Soros probably knows what he's talking about here. Probably because obviously he's a billionaire anyway, so I'm sure he has a lot of input into a lot of the decisions that are made. But, you know, ultimately, I think that this goes back to we're just going to have. I'm looking at this from the United States perspective. We're going to be getting involved in this some way or another, and I feel like it's really unstable over there. So I really feel like there's going to be the continuous artificial manipulation of where money goes.
Yeah, they will not allow country by country to exit the euro, default on its debt. That's a big black eye, and that starts to then make people question all of the central banks' inabilities to pay. And so what's going to happen is, and the reason Soros was saying is that he's looking to make sure
right.
that the EU takes a much bigger stance and a much bolder stance in terms of supporting all of the EU entities, because they do not want that thing to go down and to be fragmented. So what you can guess is going to happen is they're going to print up more money to make sure that all the countries stay in and that the austerity isn't as strict as otherwise might be if they were on their own, and therefore they'll induce the voters to stay in the EU and make it seem like that's their only option, because what every person will do if they're given a chance is to avoid the pain. And if they can say that staying in the EU is going to be better because we're going to print up the difference and we're going to keep you in here, then people will go for that. If someone promises you medicine and it's going to hurt, it's very hard, for you to say, sure, I'll put up with it for 2 years. I won't get my pension. I'm not going to get my benefits. And because things are going to be better in 3 years, most people will put it off. And if the EU can put together a package that further kicks the can down the road, they will. And if they have to have help from the Federal Reserve, they'll probably get it. So that's probably what's going to happen, because what naturally would happen is these countries would finally throw the towel in and say, we can't pay, and they would default. And that would basically call into question all of the sovereign countries' debt.
Right.
Including the United States, because the United States has a $14 trillion debt that it probably can't pay.
I know that it can't pay that, and it'll just, as Ben Bernanke said in 2002, the United States has something the other countries don't have. It's called a printing press. Yeah, and that makes it right.
And you heard Greenspan reinforce those points of view a year ago when he was on one of those talking head shows, and he said the U.S. will never default because it can always print the difference.
Yeah, and that's why I said, this. It's just they're going to continuously kick the can down the road until I guess until we get into that situation that you spoke about earlier, where we're in a hyperinflationary period, where these CPI inflation numbers that they report out finally, it won't matter anymore, and people will be like, look, I'm getting sick of paying $10 a gallon for milk. It's going to have to be something.
Even though the government is telling you the prices haven't really gone up that much.
Exactly. Yep. It's interesting to me, Louis, because I always look at things as, okay, it's like, if somebody were posed with two different scenarios, one being, that you hit rock bottom and go into more of a depressionary atmosphere for a year or two, versus being in a recessionary environment for 10 to 15 years, which one would you rather have?
Well, you'd rather have the former than the latter. And if you look at the United States history, we had exactly that in 1920. We had a severe depression. The Federal Reserve did absolutely nothing, and it worked itself out, and it was over in about 18 months. And then if you look at the Great Depression, that went on for 10, 12, 13 years, didn't really end until the end of World War II.
Right.
But during that time period, the government and Franklin Roosevelt were making statements how they were doing things. They were doing government work projects, giving speeches, making people feel better, but really nothing was happening to improve the underlying economy.
Yeah, I mean, and really, printing of more money is not helping the underlying economy.
Well, if printing money were the answer, then every country would do it and just hand out money and everybody would be rich. But we know that that's not really what money is about. Economies thrive on productivity and savings, not on borrowing and debt. But you know who thrives on borrowing and debt? The banks, and the banks which control the Federal Reserve. So that's why they're encouraging a debt-based society. That's why they like student loans. The price of education goes up, but they make the loans on them. That's why they like the housing bubble, because they get to loan money for houses. And that's why they like sovereigns living beyond their means and having deficits and debt financing, because they make money on that as well.
Yeah,
They
absolutely.
have no interest to tell people to stop borrowing money because
No.
that's how they make their money. They make it lending it and they make it trading it.
Yeah. Well, the crazy part is now is that the banks, and in J.P. Morgan's case anyway, now that they're only paying basically a 0.25% to the banks to keep the money there at the reserve, they're out there taking on these risky investments where they're losing their rear end, and that's what happened with J.P. Morgan.
But generally, they don't lose their. They generally make money on all those.
Yeah, because normally they can hedge against one side and the other in an arbitrage situation where they're making money regardless of what they do.
Correct.
But obviously, this.
And by the way, adding no real productive value to the economy.
Sure. Versus, actively going out there making loans for businesses to help them, thrive.
Exactly.
And
Goods and services that people want, and then enhance people's lives and make somebody rich in the process.
yeah, and that's the frustrating thing to me is that, it's like get out there and start helping the masses and it will come back tenfold. But instead, we continue down this path of just, bankers basically keeping the money on their balance sheets, not doing anything with it, but taking on some risky investments and benefiting the banks, but not benefiting the general public. But yet,
And they're not in existence to benefit the general public. They're in existence to benefit themselves. But they've managed to rig the game to benefit themselves by taking control of the Federal Reserve, because after all, the Federal Reserve is made up of the private banks, and Jamie Dimon, who is the CEO of J.P. Morgan, is on the board of directors or governors of the New York Federal Reserve.
I would imagine that that's going to come to a halt here soon, because I believe.
But you'd have to wonder, Ryan, that this has been going on for decades.
Yeah. So I mean, really,
Realizing that the people that are in the banks that get bailed out are part and parcel of the Federal Reserve.
and it's almost like it goes unsaid that these big time CEOs of the big banks just feel like they're untouchable until a report like this comes out. You know what I mean? Oh, he can be hit as well. You know what I mean?
Well, he can, but the bank won't be.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, in the scheme of things, what they sold off $25 billion in assets to cover this loss. I believe it was something like that to net
It's
them
strange
about.
that they sell $25 billion worth of assets to cover what's purported to be in the public a $2 billion loss.
Yeah, and I believe that the article went on to say that of that $25 billion in assets that were sold, it was going to net them about $1 billion, like something in that. It didn't make much sense to me. So there's definitely more to the story than what we really know. We're coming,
or we'll ever know.
yeah, or that we'll ever know. We'll never know. Oh, maybe 20, 30 years down the road, somebody wants to come out from inside J.P. Morgan and tell their story. But outside of that, yeah, it seems so much of the same stuff's going on with the big banks. We're coming up on a break. When we come back, we're going to give you the top tips to staging your home to sell for top dollar in today's market when we come back.